الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر.
Welcome to Let the Quran Speak. My name is Sophia, I'm your host. The aim of Let the Quran Speak is to help you gain deeper insights into Muslims and Islam, as it is practiced here and in other parts of the world. Several disasters have struck close to home recently. Severe storms struck Calgary and then Toronto. In Calgary, thousands were evacuated, their homes and belongings destroyed by the water. In Toronto, residents were without power for several hours, and then in Montreal, a train derailment killed passers-by and demolished residential and commercial buildings. How do people react to disasters? Can religion inform our behavior in stressful times? Here to offer his perspective on these disasters, Dr. Shabir Ali, President of the Islamic Information Center. Dr. Shabir, welcome to Let the Quran Speak.
Pleasure to be on.
So we've heard a lot in the news about some incidents, as I mentioned, in Calgary, Toronto, in Montreal. What are your thoughts on how we can respond to those disasters?
Of course, the various responses are known. One response is the response of the person who's lost hope, and asks, what has happened to me? What have I done wrong? And so on. And it seems sometimes that life is meaningless, and everything looks good one day, and then suddenly the disaster like this strikes, and then what about tomorrow? Tomorrow is entirely different. Well, the proper response of the believer is to have faith and put trust in God, and to remain patient in the face of these disasters. So one of the things that we learn in fasting, to exercise patience. We cannot always have what we want, and things do not always go the way we expect, and even the way we plan. And yes, we might live in a place like Canada where everything is fine. We have security, we have freedom, and life is beautiful. And yet, as it happened in the Lac Mégantic town, some people went to bed well and good at night, and they didn't wake up the next morning. Mm-hmm. The train derailment led to a series of explosions that killed many people, some of them who are just simply said to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. People were just out at night enjoying themselves, and this happened. So it shows the fragility of life, but believers are already prepared to deal with this, mm-hmm. in the sense that believers often expect that their lives could end at any time. They know that their lives are not theirs to control entirely, and that God is in full control of all things. He gives life and He takes.
Mm-hmm. You talked about control. We live, in modern times where we feel that we have gained some control over our lives. And yet in situations, for example, a flood, the power going out, water, not having access to water, one realizes that what do? You don't know what to do in that situation. You're helpless, and you have to figure out what to do in those circumstances.
Yes, simple things like the power outage or the lack of water for some time can really throw people off balance, yes. Because we have become dependent on these things. Mm-hmm. Well, one survival strategy for human beings in general is not to become too dependent on things. We use things because they're available, but we shouldn't make this equation that I and these things are inseparable. Mm-hmm. We should think of ourselves as individuals. We were born into a world, we came with nothing, and eventually we will leave this world. We will leave with nothing. So our attachment shouldn't be with the facilities and the good things that are here in this life. Rather, the believer sets his or her hopes in the life hereafter, and the ultimate attachment is with God, who lives and never dies. He's always around and will never disappear. So the beautiful things of this life and all of the material benefits will come and go, but God stays forever. So if our relationship is set right with God, then we cannot fall into a situation of despair. Yes, we will have inconveniences, but our religion teaches us how to prepare for such things, even if we didn't think about this as survival preparedness. The very fact that Muslims, for example, in fasting, are able to live without food and drink from morning till evening during the daylight hours of the month of Ramadan. And this helps us to be deprived of these things if the situation so arises that we are deprived. You know, if someone is without food for a few hours, you'll see them saying, "Oh, I'm so hungry," and sometimes people use the expression, you know, "I'm starving." Someone says, you know, "I'm dying, I'm gonna die if I don't get something to eat." Well, of course they're exaggerating, and they know that, and we all know that. But the dependence on food is real. People do find themselves fluttering about, looking for something to eat or to drink. But the Muslim, being trained already to withstand hunger and thirst, can survive in many situations in which food and water is not available, because rather than going about thinking, "Oh man, I'm starving," and one can remember the lessons from the month of Ramadan and say, "Well, wait a minute, in the month of Ramadan I stayed for so many hours without food and drink. I can manage now as well. Let me focus on other things which are more important for my survival in the situation, rather than just thinking about my stomach."
Living through the Toronto flood, one would realize how privileged one is, because you know, there's so many things that you take for granted. When the power went off and the water went off, we didn't have water. I thought, well, we could survive with the power off if we only had water, right? And then you have the power as well, and then you realize, okay, you're really reliant on these things, but they're not necessary.
Yes, and of course, I mean, if I add a personal note here, then you know, the electricity, which is so basic to everything that we're doing, we're so dependent on so many things that run on electricity that we just take it for granted and we don't realize that we're using it. You know, I wanted to stay in touch with the world. I wanted to find out what's the latest in the news. So I wanted to use my computer. Okay, the computer is down. Okay, so I thought, oh, but my tablet has still got power. I'll go use my tablet. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, that's not going to help much because it's not going to be connected to the internet, which depends on the Wi-Fi, which again is electricity powered. So the things that we're using every day are so common now to us that we take it for granted that they will always be there for us. And the bottom line is that no, these things may or may not be there for us. The real question is, are we going to be there for God? Because God is always there for us in some way or another. And as bad as things appear, there is a lesson to be learned from all of this. And human beings sometimes would prefer that we didn't have any of these disasters. Of course, it's easier to speak about them because here we are in the studio and we weren't so directly affected by, as some people were, who are dealing with the massive effects of flooding and sometimes damage to property, and in the case of Lac Megantic, the loss of life, loved ones, and so on. So we sympathize with all of that. But since we are here in the studio and we have the opportunity to think of this in a level-headed manner, seeing the broad picture, we can say that yes, while we sympathize with those who have lost big time in these disasters, at the same time we should understand that God is always there for us in some way or another, even though things look very bad. And we would prefer not to have these disasters, but we come out of these disasters bigger and stronger. We start looking at our faulty systems and we find ways of repairing them, fixing them, improving them, so that we do not have such disasters in the future. What that means is that to a larger extent, we become more developed as human beings, we become more intelligent through these experiences, and we take life to a higher stage. So our evolution as human beings continue, and our intelligence continues to grow.
And I guess we develop a greater capacity, a greater understanding of the capacity of human beings. to rise to the top, to become heroes, to do good things in these situations?
Yeah, sometimes we think like some teenagers who expect mom and dad to be always there and to do everything for us. So in that case, we don't have to do anything. Everything is provided for us. Why doesn't God provide everything and we don't have to worry about a single thing? But God created us as such creatures who will have the intelligence to explore life, to understand their environments, and to take control of their environments. That's what we are, and we should live up to that expectation.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Shabir.
You're welcome.
We'll take a break. When we return, can Islam and democracy coexist?